She's a Beverly Hills urologist. She's good looking. She's been there for a long, hot minute. She's seen every celebrity and every star that you can think of. She's watched modern medicine solve the erectile dysfunction issue and build $1 billion industry around it. But what happens when it comes to women? She's here to tell you all the secrets. What's shaking, everybody? My name is Ross Mandell. I'm coming to you guys from Delray Beach, Florida. I'm at Scott Woolley Studios. I got a big treat for you all right now. She's good looking. She's smart. She's successful. You know, I want to tell you that she's a doctor in Beverly Hills, but she really is. She's a famous urologist to the stars, household names, and she's up to speed, up to date on everything that's relevant in the world of medicine, anti-aging, now telemedicine, I'm told. So I want to just say, Dr. Jen Berman, it's so great to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Ross. I'm happy to be here.
So nice to see you. I mean, you know, oftentimes when I do a podcast, and especially a virtual type podcast, I haven't met or spoken with the guest. But in our particular case, you know, yes, we practically dated. I mean, the two of us.
We had a weekend together.
We spent some time together in an odd way, right? And it was really great. And I feel like I have a forever friend on the left coast over there. So when I do come out to California, you're going to be one of the first people I take out for lunch or dinner. That's very exciting.
You got it.
And, you know, for men, the urologist has a special meaning. You know what I mean? It's the kind of thing when you know, I just turned 69 years old last week, by the way.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Just had my 50-year high school reunion. We chatted about that off camera for a second. But it's very interesting because when I sort of see my guys, my old high school friends, and now my business friends and partners and stuff like that, someone always mentions the urologist. What is it with men in urology? Can you share with us just briefly?
Well, you know, back in the day, things have changed a little bit, but it used to be that was the annual digital rectal exam was performed by your urologist. And that was to examine the prostate gland, which is, a gland in the male reproductive tract that is susceptible to cancer and cancerous growth. And that used to be part of annual screening, like your colonoscopy, your mammogram, the annual digital exam. And men dreaded that. And so that was like the root of the jokes. The urologist is also the doctor, the gatekeeper for male sexual function and sexual health. So that's who you would go to if you were having issues with your performance, erectile function. And then the urologist is also used to be the gatekeeper for the doctor that gave testosterone for men that had lower testosterones or waning libido and things along those lines. So the urologist was very important to men, and now today women as well.
Now, to use the word was, I'm telling you, is.
Well, now there's primary care doctors,
right.
There's regenerative medicine doctors, our internal medicine our internists are trained in erectile dysfunction and testosterone. So there are other ways that patients can get access to a lot of these treatments. In terms of the prostate gland and the male genitourinary tract, that falls into the category of urologists. And a disease of aging is BPH, swelling of the prostate gland, that impacts male urinary function and sexual function. So the urologist is a very important, just like the gynecologist is to the woman, the urologist is to the man.
Yeah, you know, it's very interesting because it's the gland you speak about, the prostate. It seems like every man has an issue with the prostate. Everybody. And, you know, I mean, it's really true. And,
it's a pretty Yeah, it's a nuisance, right? But the good news is that there are, with advances in modern medicine, in contrast to what women have, have been marginalized by the medical community in some ways, but men have a litany of pharmacological options for prostate gland, surgical, interventional radiology, freezing of the prostate, ultrasound of the prostate, there's sound waves to the prostate, minimally invasive treatments for cancer, robotic treatments. So the advances in the field, technologically and medically and pharmacologically, in terms of male urology, are astounding to me and continue. What's changed, why I said the digital rectal exam, is because what they have found now is that that prostate, there's two types of prostate cancer. Most men, including yourself, will have low-grade prostate cancer at death. It's not an aggressive tumor. It exists in men, and it's not a cause of death. When men die, it's not usually due to prostate cancer. So this craze that we went through in my training back in the 90s of screening men and aggressively treating men with rising PSA
Right.
levels and biopsying all of them. We were performing cancer operations on young men, middle-aged men, and old men, and that has changed. We're not as aggressive at going after prostate cancers anymore because the surgeries and the treatments for that were invasive. It was causing men to become impotent and incontinent, and the radiation therapy were, there were devastating quality of life issues and consequences that were related to our interventions, our aggressive chasing after prostate cancer. Now we realize that that prostate cancer isn't the cause of death in these men, and the surgeries and treatments that we were doing to prevent that were causing more harm than good.
I've heard it said, and you might have just confirmed it, but I'm really excited now to actually have you on the show right now. That 100% of men, 100% of men at autopsy, there is some trace of cancer in the prostate. It's 100%. But you're right,
true.
but it's not cause of death or anything like that.
Not their cause of death.
But
correct.
we all have cancer. I don't understand really how much or why. And I will say, based on what you just said, I have somebody close to me. He had cancer. His PSA was like 23. It was ridiculous. And he ignored it. And finally, it told him he had stage 4 cancer, all 4 quadrants of the prostate. And he had a very aggressive series of treatments. He stayed with me. I sort of helped, he stayed on my couch. I nursed him through a little bit for a summer. He had radiation treatment, very severe. And they got all the cancer, apparently. At least they say he's cancer-free right now. But it did affect his ability to perform sexually, which for a lot of men, that's an end-of-life kind of scenario.
True. But back then we had, now there's pharmacological treatments, the oral, Viagra, Levitra, Cialis.
Right.
Back then and now we had injections into the penis. And then in extreme cases, not only in patients with cancer, but patients with diabetes, for example, the penile implant. And again, I'm so far removed from general urology. I specialized in female urology and pelvic floor reconstructive surgery.
Right.
So it's been decades since I've focused on male urology, but I know that the penile implant, the semi-rigid penile implant, we used to call it the Gumby doll. It would bend.
Yep.
And then the inflatable penile, the Mentor penile prosthesis pump.
Wow.
So there are ways that men can attain and sustain erections, and now there's vacuum erection devices and all sorts of other things.
I had a partner in about 25 years ago, 2002, 2004, who had a penile implant. And he used to come to the office and he'd say, "You want to see?" To the girl. He was such a crazy lunatic. He was a multimillionaire at a very young age, and he just acted out, and somehow he found me in the stock market, all these different things. But so, yes, you named the big three: Viagra, Cialis, Avitra. For men, we have a host of a variety of opportunities to sort of curate our sex lives and uh, uh, help ourselves to achieve whatever we're trying to achieve. But it's funny preparing for this podcast. As you know, my number one teammate Stephanie prepared a whole slew of notes. And I always thought that women had more attention than men in this arena because women. Let me tell you what, because of my little, my business ventures. Women go through menopause. It's very obvious because you bleed, and one day you stop bleeding, and it's all these different things, right? There's a line in the sand, right? You start bleeding when you're young, and you stop bleeding at some point, and there's all kinds of things that go on. Men go through what they call andropause, which for years we were neglected, and there was no medicine paid attention to that kind of a thing. And for women, there was a million different, thoughts and treatments and all that kind of. All of a sudden, you're right. For like 20 years, all we talked about was men and testosterone and, penile implants and performance and all these different things. And I didn't realize that women sort of got neglected, didn't you guys?
We've been totally neglected. We've been neglected all along. While we knew menopause existed, the symptoms associated with it, the changes that occur due to it, were not and still are not considered medically relevant. When you refer to andropause, what was misunderstood in men, it wasn't that it was neglected or ignored. In women, there's an abrupt change,
right.
First where, all of a sudden we're fine, and then boom, we're menopausal, and it's devastating, significant symptoms. In men, the andropause that you describe is gradual. Right. It's not like all of a sudden they're 50 crash.
Right, years and years. Right.
Trust me, like sirens would play, there would be like a 911, there'd be Armageddon happening, the world would end if that happened to men.
Correct.
It doesn't. It's a gradual decline, and we didn't really recognize that as change. The men would gain weight, they would get tired, they'd start to lose lean muscle mass, maybe they weren't as sharp, maybe they were depressed, had some mood issues, but it wasn't like the dramatic changes that occurred in women. But as soon as we figured it out, this andropause, this subtle decline in virility, in testosterone, in energy, in these quality of life symptoms, the quality of life symptoms were considered and are considered in men extremely medically relevant and deserving medical attention. And there's 1,000,001 different ED drugs for you. There's 15,000 different testosterone formulations in terms of injection, in terms of gels, in terms of, ones that get oral
pellets.
Systems. There's 1,000,001 different options for you for your quality of life issues that you're suffering with, and your cognitive function, and your mood, and your lean muscle mass, and your energy, and your weight, and everything. Women, it's not the case. So yes, we understood that there was menopause and all these things happened, but the medical community was not acknowledging these symptoms as medically relevant. And then around 2010, there was a huge problem that happened. Misinformation was delivered, globally, that by it was the National Health Survey in women saying that estrogen causes breast cancer. So there was a huge release of misinformation that scared the world. That estrogen is bad and estrogen causes breast cancer, and all women were taken off of hormone replacement therapy. And what happened with that, it was misinformation. They came out a couple of years later and were like, oh, okay, oops, sorry, we said it wrong. Estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer per se.
Wow.
But we're just going to leave it at that. And they left over a decade, probably 20 years of providers, of doctors, surgeons, medical students, residents, internists, all of our primary care doctors, untrained and without information, resources, algorithms, protocols, standards of care for treating the midlife woman. And what happened was, I became midlife and nobody was there to treat me. And, all the shit hit the fucking fan, excuse my language. And
Okay.
I've made my career. I have made my living on the neglect of the medical community, and mostly the neglect of our gynecologists. The gynecologists are supposed to be the gatekeepers to women's health. Okay. They're who we go to for our reproductive health needs, for our having babies, for our sexuality and our reproductive health. And they're great for that until you're not reproductive age anymore. Once you're not having babies anymore and you're not ovulating anymore, you're sort of like phased out. And all of the symptoms and all of the issues that develop related to same ones as you: memory, mood, sleep, weight gain, low libido, vaginal dryness, the moodiness, depression, anxiety, loss of bone mineral density, loss of muscle mass, aching, creaking bones, elevation, air collapse, all of that stuff was and still is to some degree overlooked, neglected, and attributed to other things. And when women came into their doctors in the perimenopause especially, so right before menopause, that's another very delicate time, with mood issues, the rise and fall of estrogen, the female brain is very sensitive to fluctuations in hormone levels, the up, down. You're very well aware of postpartum depression, what women can become homicidal, suicidal, postpartum. That's due to dropping in estrogen. We are very aware of what's called PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, where women in their periods can have really debilitating psychosis and mood changes due to fluctuations in estrogen. Well, the regular run-of-the-mill woman, such as myself and millions of other American women and globally women, may not have PMDD and may not have postpartum depression, but our brains are still shrinking and very sensitive to the ups and downs of estrogen. And so when we go to our doctors and are complaining of this, they, instead of treating the root cause, which is hormone imbalance, they were treating women with Prozac, Paxil, Zola, antidepressants, okay? Which then have another whole host of side effects and other things. And then they can't focus. Memory, focus, concentration. Estrogen and testosterone impact our ability to focus, to concentrate, to multitask, to remember, to be on our game, to be doing all the things that we're great at doing. Declines in estrogen impact that. So then they put us on Adderall. So Prozac plus Adderall. Then we start gaining weight. So they were treating putting Band-Aids.
Symptoms. Treating symptoms. What they perceive to be the symptoms.
Exactly.
Wow.
And that's been a huge disservice to women and caused, what basically an epidemic of women that are suffering, struggling, overweight, tired, pulling back from the workforce, marriages falling apart. And, it's had devastating consequences on quality of life, quantity of life, productivity in the workplace, and vitality of our female population.
So what you're saying, this is just for me to clarify, because there are going to be men like me listening. Testosterone is to the man what estrogen is to the woman, essentially.
Yes. However, I'm going to say testosterone isn't just for men. You do not get to claim that. Testosterone is equally important in different ways, similar and different ways than it is in men. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they're three critical hormones in women. In men, yours is testosterone primarily. Estrogen and progesterone are not relevant. To some degree, estrogen a little bit, but testosterone is yours. In ours, all three hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Without testosterone, if you take testosterone away, which basically they are right now, testosterone is away. Testosterone is not FDA approved for use in women.
Really?
Right now.
Really?
Yeah.
I know women that are taking testosterone, albeit very small doses.
They are taking it, and we can take it off label. So it can be prescribed off label, compounded. Some doctors are using the same prescriptions that are available to men in lower doses and, adjusting those doses. Most providers are compounding testosterone for women, and I've been doing that for decades as well. I was fortunate enough, again, due to my research and training, my background in male urology is what enabled me to have the foundation and understanding of the use of testosterone in humans and apply that to women. So it was just luck that I happened to fall into that and have the education and training early on in order to learn how to titrate, dose, and prescribe testosterone to women decades ago, well before, we got to this point. Yep. But testosterone is equally important for women, for bone mineral density, for cognitive function, for energy levels, for sleep, for mood, for cardiovascular health, for vitality, your physical energy, your endurance, your emotional energy, your motivation. Let's go here, the joie de vivre kind of energy, your sexual motivation and energy are all testosterone related.
Jen, I want to just spin the dial real quick because I'd like to learn a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up? You weren't always Dr. Jen Berman.
No. I grew up, actually, I'm from New York, originally Manhattan. And, my father, was a general surgeon, turned colorectal surgeon.
Wow.
And, we lived in Manhattan, and my parents moved from New York City to rural Southeast Georgia. Brunswick, Georgia, Sea Island, Georgia, when I was 15 years old and in high school. So my father, and again, both of my parents are passed right now. And I had this conversation many times, but I never really got a straight answer. And I've come to my conclusions, later in life that move from the city to Georgia for my father he was a big fish in a small pond. He was the only colorectal surgeon in all of Glenn County. So for miles and miles, people would come. And this was before managed care, when doctors were heroes and
right.
And he was the king of that town. And as a result, it was the big fish in small pond. He helped a lot of people. He was, I remember people paying him with chickens and pigs and, arrows with gold. And so he had, and he remained, tied to academia. He was an inventor, an academic, an artist, an eclectic and very unusual, interesting man, and lived a very robust life there. We were Jewish. That was the other thing. So I got the whole anti-Semitism talk before we moved down there. And I think we were literally maybe the only Jewish people that admitted it, but we were I remember being an issue.
Yeah.
And my father ended up starting a synagogue there. He there's a female rabbi. He brought in a female rabbi she has like an endowed chair. She's there for life. And he started a polo team. And so that was his vision and dream. And the reality is, moving there from Manhattan to there, I'm not sure if I would have become a doctor had I stayed in Manhattan, because
Wow.
going down to Georgia, he would take me to the operating room like when I was 15 years old, not by choice. I would
Right.
dragging me in there when he was on call. A couple of times he wanted me to see the consequences of drunk driving, which I did firsthand.
Gosh.
And then on weekends when I'd be wanting to go riding horses or sailing or doing other things and he had to make rounds or he had to do stuff, I would go with him. So I was exposed to that, and I was able to go into the operating room when I was 15, 16 years, literally scrubbing in back then,
Wow.
and putting my hands in, talking to people, when I was a teenager. And when I went off to college, I wasn't to be a doctor. I wanted to be a writer, actually. And I ended up, it was how I got to medicine was just probably by virtue of osmosis. I saw, the joy of that field, and somebody that really appreciated it, never considered it work. It was never a job. It was a lifestyle and a passion. And I, ended up following in those foot tracks, not intentionally and not planned. And he and I had a very, we had a challenging but very loving relationship. And it wasn't my goal to be him or be like him or follow in his footsteps. But weirdly enough, I did. And did a lot of the same things, the innovative things, the taboo subjects that he covered with colorectal surgery, talking about, anuses and poops and all that sort of stuff, and the fodder and the jokes around that. I remember, somehow like probably primed me to be, to not be impacted by shame, to be able to approach things with humor and taboo, absolutely unfazed by taboo subjects.
That's really, really, see, we wouldn't have known that if we didn't, step out of the conversation for a minute. And that's fascinating. And I was thinking to myself, how upsetting that must have been. I mean, you're 15 years old. I mean, you're a beautiful woman now. I am sure you were a stunning teenager in Manhattan, nice family, right? Dad's a surgeon, living probably in a nice neighborhood and going to great schools, and the boys and the girl, the friends, and the whole scene, the cliques, to uproot you like that at 15. I would have had a panic attack.
I was, and we were on the Upper East Side. I went to Dalton.
What a shock, right? I get it.
It was like a whole different world. And moving down south, which was the Bible Belt, born again Christians, and that it was.
I can't even imagine.
But being Jewish, ironically, Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah.
I was the chosen purpose. I was very popular because they all wanted to convert me, which I didn't realize at the time. And I would go to youth group. A lot of the social scenes were around, the church and youth group. And of course, I had already been exposed to drugs and alcohol and everything up there. So I had both sides. I had the church group, and then I had my wild side. But I couldn't get away with anything because my father knew everyone, the sheriff, the police guy, everybody in the liquor store. I couldn't do anything. Everybody knew him, and I was.
So where'd you go to college? Did you stay in that area, or did you go?
I ended up going to college, a small liberal arts college in Virginia, with my horse. I'm a horse addict and aficionado, and the horse is really important to me. And I was exposed, and at that time, going through puberty and dating, I was exposed to, Christian men, and Jewish. So people say, why did you marry a nice Jewish boy? I was not exposed to Jewish men, and from a dating standpoint, until pretty much medical school. So I went through college. I went to college in the South. We dated boys from Washington and Lee University and University of Virginia. I ended up marrying he was America's Cup sailor, a sailboat racer, and that was my first husband. And then I ended up going to medical school in Boston, and then I did my residency in Baltimore. My father is actually from Baltimore. We had a lot of family in Baltimore. Went back to horses in Baltimore. Baltimore is a very horse country. And then I ended up I did my urology residency. I did research in male erectile dysfunction, female and male sexual dysfunction, and then came out to Los Angeles to do a fellowship training in female urology and pelvic floor reconstructive surgery at UCLA. And that's how I ended up out here. They ended up offering me a job. I did my fellowship. They offered me a job and asked me to create the Female Sexual Medicine Center there.
At UCLA. At UCLA.
UCLA, yes.
That's like a big deal. That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It was a big deal. And due to the work that I was doing and the nature of the work in female sexual health and the groundbreaking aspects of it that hadn't been considered medically relevant before, there was a lot of media attention, and I had a television show and a best-selling book, and that was all that managing those two things, the media and academia, was challenging, was very hard. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, but I ultimately left UCLA, I think in 2007, due to I had to make a decision. Am I going to be an academic doctor and go and develop NIH grants and teach, or am I going to try to educate, to go into the private practice to where I felt like I could reach more women and have a voice that could impact. I never left the science part, but from the standpoint, I feel like my purpose was more of a messenger of information for educating women about these issues. And I wasn't really able to do that.
What better place in Beverly Hills?
That's right.
You picked a certain type of a woman. Now, you mentioned you were married more than once. I think you mentioned your first husband, who was an American Cup racer.
American Cup sailor, now turned. What is he doing now? He got his master's in public health and is doing stuff with workman's comp, actually. And my second husband is in the music industry and very Jewish. Actually, so I came full circle. And in fact, I think my mother from heaven picked this Jewish one for me. Back then, I never in a million years, if I had met him in college or anything, like he wouldn't have even crossed my radar. But, with age and wisdom and growth and life, he came full circle. So and I got married in 2018.
You still married or no?
Still married.
Okay, I didn't know that. Now did you have children along the way?
From the first husband, I had children. I had 2 children, Max and Isabel. Max is in med school now.
Wow.
At Tulane, and Isabel is going to UCLA Law School. She just got into UCLA Law School.
So nice. I have a daughter in law school too right now. Isn't that great? Isn't that great stuff? Wow. So you end up leaving Manhattan's Upper East Side. You take quite a little journey, life's journey, right? We never know what's going to happen in this incredible journey we call life. But you end up in Beverly Hills, so you didn't really go too far from Manhattan's Upper East Side.
Yeah.
You sort of went to the West Side. And yet you are really like a pioneer when it comes to female health and wellness, really, right? It's more than just health, I think. So for me, health is my PSA score, right? That's good. I don't have any issues with that, right? And but for wellness is my ability to perform sexually, my attractiveness, my desire, whether I care or not, right? That's all. You're saying that's all part of the hormone journey, right?
Yeah, it is.
As young men, we want to have sex 5 times a day when we're young. and then we get married and we have kids and we have mortgages and stress, and we attribute a lessening of certain desires. I've learned personally, but I'm sharing that with the audience right now, that it's not so much to do with stress and mortgages and obligations of being an adult or a grown up or a parent, right? It has to do with your chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
It's your chemistry. When your testosterone is, under 200, what a shock that you're not inspired, right? By the very woman that you couldn't keep your hands off of. All of a sudden, you'd rather go eat a bagel in the kitchen. And you attribute it to all kinds of stuff. But I've been educated. I've been fortunate enough, because I've been in like sort of the money business, and I fund companies, and people come to me with all the cutting edge stuff, et cetera, over the last 45 years of my life. So I'm keen on evolving science and things of that nature. I was an investor in the first anti-aging clinic right here in Boca Raton. So I was exposed to, the wonders of, testosterone. At $18 a bottle, we're selling it for $3.50. Crazy, right? That's another, crazy aspect of medicine, right? Is the financial and business part. So what I'd love to know is, tell us about your day. What is a Beverly Hills urologist do? You wake up, you go to the office. Yeah, I'm sure you have a nice office, correct?
We have a nice office. I see patients. When unfortunately, as I said, the medical community does not acknowledge these issues, sexual health issues and quality of life issues, as being medically relevant. You're lucky because your issues are covered by insurance. In women, that's not the case. So to come see a specialist like me, women have to go out of pocket, and insurance does not cover. Like, they'll cover, estrogen and progesterone in a menopausal woman for a short period of time. But the things that you're talking about in terms of testosterone, in terms of balancing hormones, in terms of giving hormones to the perimenopausal woman, which is we haven't talked about that, but before menopause, these symptoms start in the mid to late 30s frequently in women. And that's really the window, based on the research. My academic training and my interest is capturing those women, because that's when you can get not only the symptomatic benefits, but the preventative benefits, the prevention of disease, of Alzheimer's, of cardiovascular disease, of osteoporosis, of even breast cancer. We now know that testosterone is protective in the breast against breast cancer. So we want to capture women during the perimenopause. Insurance is not recognizing that as medically relevant or medically indicated at this time, for a number of reasons. And we don't need to get into that. So that's the problem. And so then when you say that, when I'm telling you that testosterone is equally important in women as it is in men, and a handful of women that might be taking it here and there a little bit, that's a doctor, whatever random doctor that they happen to find, that was willing, confident, and able to say, okay, I can figure this out. I'll read, they're learning on Substack. They're taking weekend courses. They're talking to the compounding pharmacist and saying, well, what does Dr. So-and-so do? And I'll do that. But there's no standard of care. And if you see the doctor in Boca Raton and then another lady goes to the doctor in Sarasota, those two doctors are going to have completely different opinions, completely different algorithm and protocol, which is leading to a lot of confusion and a lot of misinformation and, a lot of angry women. And there's a movement that's going on right now that's driven not by the healthcare community, not by the medical community, FDA or DEA. It's being driven by women who are talking to each other on social media. So it's only due to social media. Before social media existed, the lady in Sarasota and the lady in New York couldn't talk to each other. But all of a sudden, with TikTok, TikTok and Instagram,
Correct.
they're talking to each other and they're saying, oh my God. And now estrogen is this buzzword, and estrogen is in Hollywood, and estrogen is in femtech, and estrogen is on Wall Street, and estrogen, not estrogen, but women's sexual health and menopause, the femtech industry, these telemedicine platforms that I told you that I'm even now launching into reluctantly and painstakingly and cringingly. It makes me ill to think about. But with these young doctors, there's doctors coming out of residency now that aren't even touching patients, that where we had the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, we lay eyes on, we lay hands on. These doctors are tech phenom geniuses who have figured out how to reach the masses without touching anybody, or some of them not even talking to anybody. Some of them are in the back end. Other doctors are in the front end, at least, doing telemedicine. But they've figured out how to reach millions of people ethically, legally, and with hormone replacement therapy. So they've been after me probably for the last 5 to 7 years to develop protocols for online, the HIMS, the HERS, the MIDI Health, the Allohoid, the TIA Health. And I was like, it just felt very cookie cutter, very generic. I saw problems before they happened. I see the problems now. I'm getting, for the middle of the bell-shaped curve, those things work okay. But for not every woman is the same. Just like men, not every man is the same. Not every man experiences andropause the same way. So it's even more so that way for women. But with this Ruth and Esther thing that you talked about, or that I sent your wife, that I haven't even shared,
Well, I want to talk about that in a minute, but one thing I want to jump on quickly, because it's a real buzzword in my world, social media, and in the world of podcasting, and perimenopausal. What does that mean? Explain that.
So perimenopause is what I was talking about before. So premenopause is when you're in your 20s and early 30s, having babies, cycling, having your period. Perimenopause is the time period, mid to late 30s, early 40s, where the egg quality is starting to decline. This is like when the biological clock, the age-old adage of men is like, her biological clock is ticking, you gotta have where their fertility starts to decline. And it's in that phase, that time period, where our hormones are going up, down, up, down, up, down. Wow. And that's a very sensitive time period where women experience a lot of mood issues, a lot of memory focus issues, weight gain, and low libido. And just like you were saying earlier, you were attributing it to, stress and all that other stuff, and you'd rather go eat a bagel. That's when this is happening in women. And they are attributing these things. Well, I lost my job, or my son didn't get into Dartmouth, or I got in a car accident, or, I'm getting divorced. All the global pandemic threw so many women, premenopausal women, into perimenopause, so stress definitely, life stress impacts your hormone balance. But it's important, it's important to recognize that. But women need to pay attention to these subtle changes. Irrespective of stress, your biology, like you said, your hormones are changing. And that perimenopausal window is really critical, because that's when we can address not only symptoms, but also get the prevention. So when they do transition into menopause, they'll be seamlessly, gracefully, without all the drama, and they will have the preventative health benefits to boot.
So it's like it would enable you to get ahead of the issue rather than deal with the issue, right? You're getting ahead of it.
Issue, suffering, and behind the ball. Now you're fat. Now your cholesterol is high.
Correct.
Now you're moody. You can't focus. You probably pulled back from your job. Maybe even lost your job.
Now. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Ruth and Esther. I've read a lot of scripture. I love to study the Torah things. I mean, you couldn't come up with two more biblical names.
And I'm so not Jewish. I'm like the waspy Jew from the South.
And by the way, you don't even look Jewish. You don't sound Jewish. It's very interesting.
And I know that, and so my grandmother and my aunt and my middle name, and it used to make me cringe, and it still kind of does, is Jennifer Ruth. I hate Ruth Berman, because it's so Jewish and so biblical.
It is very Jewish.
So I thought it's funny, and it's also comforting, and it's also empowering and healing. And that from the health standpoint of helping women during this phase of life, from the standpoint of mind, body, and spirit, and then the prescription from the Esther RX is the health prescription side of hormone replacement therapy, the combination of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and I'm hugely passionate now about peptides. And I know you probably know about them. I am a huge fan.
Yes.
Because and again, I said, we were saying before, I think before we even came on, that I am a walking poster child testimonial for my practice of medicine. Every single thing that I recommend to my patients, I do myself.
Correct.
Have tried myself, have taken, am taking, will take. So there's not one single thing that I ask them to do or recommend them to do that I wouldn't do myself, wouldn't do for my family, or am not currently doing. And as I've evolved as a woman from my mid to late 30s and my education and training, when I was focusing on male ED and sexual health, female and male sexual health, then I started having babies and becoming perimenopausal and noticing, oh my God, my mood, and I happen to be, for better or worse, one of the women that are very sensitive to fluctuations in estrogen levels. I cannot tolerate it. There are such fortunate ones that can stroll right through and seamlessly, those are the unicorns. That was not me. I wasn't homicidal or suicidal, but pretty close to it, and could not function. So I was 37 after my second baby and went into perimenopause. I was in the middle of my fellowship at UCLA, had to take my boards, writing NIH grants. And to boot, I also have a very strong family history of breast cancer. So my mother had it, died of it. My sister has it. All the aunts, Aunt Esther, Ruth, all of them had breast cancer. So the medical community was very reticent, resistant, I'm not going to say reticent, about me starting hormone replacement therapy, especially during the perimenopause. I knew that I had a greater risk than the average woman for breast cancer. I also knew that if I took estrogen, that would increase my risk more. But it didn't increase it like 95%. It was 33 to 38% more. And I was willing, due to the fact that I needed to function and could not, I was a woman that could not function without estrogen. In my mid to late 30s, I made that choice, and against medical advice, against the advice of the oncologist, Christy Funk, who's the doctor that took off Angelina Jolie's breasts, very conservative. She's now changing. All of them are now evolving and changing now that, with the advances in medicine and the information that's coming out, that's been withheld, that's now coming out. They're all sort of opening up more. But at that time, they were horrified that I was taking hormone replacement therapy during the perimenopause.
How crazy is that? How the world changes, right? Meanwhile, it's life changing.
It was life-changing, and it enabled me to continue practicing medicine. And guess what? I never got breast cancer. And I thought that I, manifested it away, but come to find out, I was on testosterone at that time. I knew I was doing,
You said it protects the breast from breast cancer earlier in this podcast.
For decades. So I was 37, I'm 61 now. So 30 years of testosterone, I have no breast cancer. And they have screened these breasts ad nauseum, every single intervention, MRIs, CT scans, and I have dense fibrocystic breasts to boot, which means that I have to have more. They kept on seeing lumps and bumps. I've been biopsied and nothing, no cancer.
And a very strong family history. breast
Very strong
cancer.
family history, which is why I believe that all women should be on testosterone, not only for the beneficial quality of life issues, but for the protective issues in the breast.
Wow. Now, when you put testosterone in your system as a 37-year-old female, your body detects this, correct? And then it forces the body to start producing more estrogen.
Well, the testosterone can get converted to estrogen in the body, can get broken down into estrogen. So, like in men too.
Right.
So, if you take testosterone,
Right.
your testosterone can be peripherally converted to estrogen. You got to be careful that your estrogen levels don't get too high.
You got to take Romadex and all these different type of tablets we take.
Exactly.
I understand that. Is that wild? You know, it's amazing how science has developed and how slow medicine is to adopt these things. It's like so rigid medicine, traditional medicine. You know what I mean? And these insurance companies that are not willing to cover women. Like I was thinking about all the women I know that do have these sort of peptides and this what I call optimum therapies. Like it's all out of pocket. They're all women that have the money. I hate to say it. They could spend an extra $500, $1,000 a month. And all the women that probably need it, you know, around this country, et cetera, you know.
Well, that's where they gaslit me into accepting this too, that the telemedicine is a way more affordable, even though it's not totally covered by insurance, it's way more affordable for the average American family woman. You know, you don't have to be wealthy to be able to get a prescription now for estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Right. The doctors, what's frightening though, is that the doctors under managed care that you go to under your insurance.
Right.
Those are the doctors that are seeing 30 patients a day on the 15-minute slot. You can go to them and get it covered, but good luck. They're not capable. They're not able. They're not trained. If all of our doctors aren't trained, those ones even less.
Correct.
So it's very frustrating for patients to say, well, you know, okay, you cost this. Let me go see if I'm going to go through my insurance. And they all end up coming back because you can't get that care from your regular provider. It's really unfortunate.
The nice thing about telemedicine is you can do it from your home.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry that you got to go see somebody and wait in their office, to commute there, to commute back, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's, you know, I have a telehealth doctor as well. And, if I need a particular prescription, whatever it is, I might have to send them my blood work and say, what's my hematocrit? You know, they ask me these questions and I'm like, I don't know, you know, but they want to see that, but it's a guy that, you know, is done an examination with me remotely at the convenience of my time, my location, you know, and, all of a sudden a prescription appears or they send it to your home. You know what I mean? If it's not a controlled type substance, all that kind of thing. But, so it's really, you have been literally at the forefront. And that's because you're an educated medical doctor who has been going through this life as a young woman, as a you know, vital young woman, and then as a married young woman, and as a young mother. You know what I'm saying? And looking for the best care and treatment that you can find personally. Not for your patients. I mean, I'm not discarding that. I'm just saying it's a self-need. Like I, you know, am going through this life trying to become the best version of Ross that I can be. You know, whether it's going into the gym, whether it's going to a doctor, whether it's my health, whether it's, you know, my financial, whether it's my dating life, etc. I want the best for Ross that I can curate. You know, I love that's a word that somebody has shown me that it applies to many things, you know, but you look to curate your life, and that's what you've done in an odd way from a medical point of view, right? And so I applaud you for that. And you really on the cutting edge. And so Ruth and Esther, it's a telemedicine platform that you're actually building right now. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I'm building it right now.
And it's focused on midlife women's health, specifically the intersection of hormones, metabolism, brain function, and identity. And it's not just about treating.
There's loss of identity. I want that in addition, the mood and cognitive function were my two the most precious things to me, feeling happy and vital, and also ability to function.
Of course.
Concentration and my brain, the RAM in my brain, the speed at which my brain works. Women, those are the first two things to decline. And I believe that women, we don't see women in their 70s and 80s leading Fortune 500 companies right now, not because they can't, not because they're not equal to men, but because they were not optimized on hormones. That is all going to change. I think Hillary would have been president if she were on hormone. She definitely was not on hormone replacement therapy. And I saw her starting to wither away and, and go inward. And if she had testosterone and were hormone balanced, I don't know this for a fact, but this is my theory, is that she would have been president, and that women will be presidents and remain presidents of companies and remain in the workforce. I think it's a civil right that we deserve hormone replacement therapy. I think companies need to be offering this to their patients. And in order for us to remain productive and competitive in the work, competitive with younger women and definitely competitive with men,
correct,
we need to be firing on all cylinders, and our brains are shrinking. We already know that. The neuroscientists have shown everybody that our brains are shrinking with age and menopause. In order for us to remain productive, competitive in the workplace and in society, we need hormone replacement therapy.
I applaud you for. I would stand up and clap right now. Except my director would kill me.
You're the master, and so from that standpoint, the vitality, the cognitive function, it's not just about bone mineral density and sex. It's about you get redefined. Who I was in my 20s and 30s isn't who I am now as a woman. Not just by consequence of life changes and trauma and marriage and divorce. It's my biology is changing.
Chemistry is
changing. Your chemistry creates a new version of you. And if your chemistry is not balanced and off and you're not getting, what you need, that's going to impact your DNA, how you engage with the world, the decisions that you make, your choices that you make, and, the life that you lead.
I always like to say, you don't know what you don't know. And I was exposed to hormone replacement therapy, TRT stuff, growth hormone, all the different steroids and so forth that they said was so terrible for you and all these different things, about 30 years ago. And I've tried to explain it to some of my friends, my conservative friends, business partners, associates, etc. And they look at me like I'm friggin' nuts.
Really?
Well, they did. Over the years. Now, of course, they're all taking TRT. Why? Because their doctor prescribes it. Insurance covers it. They fill the prescription at their local CVS or Walgreens for like $7. And it must be okay because the doctor says it's okay. But I mean, I know a lot of medical doctors that still have no clue. I mean, zero clue. And they don't really care. Because a lot of medicine today is, like you said, 15-minute appointments, 30 a day. They get paid. They want to go home, go fishing, go on their boat. They live in Florida, that sort of a thing. They're not really interested in, until it affects them, right? But Jen Berman has had quite a few things. We're all fortunate. I've said the female race is fortunate because Jen Berman had to experience a lot of hot flashes along the way and some mood swings and some anger issues and all these different things, not because you're wacky, but because you're a woman. And because
everything it's used in the workplace. Urology is a very male-dominated field.
Oh yeah, I get that.
And like going back, and what else is funny? It's a whole nother conversation. And is in terms of sexual harassment by today's standards. I was sexually harassed. It could care like it doesn't every single day of my life.
Right.
And it's funny now, I have a younger daughter who is, I guess she's a Gen Z, who notices me and how I navigate the world and how I navigate those situations. It still happens in the gas, whatever.
Of course.
And I've been conditioned by my mother and by society. We just ignore it, roll it on,
Right.
I don't even like it's in one ear, out with the other. I'll smile, but I don't engage with it. I don't encourage with it. She is horrified by that, by the fact that I don't say something, or that I don't do anything, or that I use my feminine sort of
Right.
like whatever to like weasel away from it. I think that that's really, really interesting. And that's a whole other.
I have a
other
daughter the same way, who, who lectures me and yells at me. Dad. They watch my social media like hawks. Dad, why'd you click like that? Dad, that's
I'm
creepy.
used to it. Yeah. And in some
Yeah.
ways it's funny and entertaining, and I let it go in one ear out with it. But the millennials, God bless them, they did create change. The whole Me Too movement,
Correct.
I attribute to them.
They're not
And it
standing
needed
for
to
it.
happen.
Now, is there anything I know we're coming up to our hard stop, so is there anything that we haven't covered today, Jen? Because this is great. You've been so open about everything, and I just love you for it.
I just encourage women to be, sensitive and aware about the changes that are occurring in their bodies. Don't attribute them. Yes, stress happens. Yes, life happens. Yes, all of that can impact our well-being. But there are real hormonal medical issues that occur that are medically relevant, that can be treated, that can optimize your health, your longevity, your well-being, your emotional vitality, physical vitality, longevity. As far as I'm concerned, I want to, in my 70s, 80s, 90s, be playing tennis, bending down, picking up if you want, we want to be living. I can't guarantee that we can, at least not yet. I can't add another 10, 20 years onto your life. But what I know for sure I can do for myself and you and others is enhance and optimize those last decades. So you're living a vital, happy, sexually fulfilled life, looking and feeling your best.
I love it. I want to thank you for coming on today, Jen.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to air this, and I can't wait to see you out in Beverly Hills myself.
Likewise. And in Florida, when I come to Florida.
Well, when you must let me know.
And I told you my girlfriend is back there this weekend that I'm fixing you up with.
The horseback riding girl.
The horseback riding
That's
girl.
the only thing I remember, really.
Exactly. That's
But
so
if
fun.
it's coming from Dr. Jennifer Berman, I pay attention, and so should you. Thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Thank you.